Welcome to Infertility Stories,
a podcast about what it's really like to go through infertility while you're still in it.
Hosted by us, Miriam
and Elisa,
two women who became friends through years of trying to conceive. Coming up on today's episode, what if one of us gets pregnant while we're making this podcast about infertility?
That I decided I'm not going to do that anymore.
Starting off at the deep end.
Of course, immediately my mind is going like, okay, so what's going to happen now? Will I have an ovulation? When would it happen?
Haven't run this by you yet, but
if I'm fertile, then why am I not getting pregnant?
Your diagnosis is unexplained infertility, which
I was going through my second loss and I had surgery, and I was thinking,
I'm running away from my period like it was a pack of wolves chasing after me.
Even though in some ways I am less fertile because I only have one fallopian tube now, still I feel more fertile than I did a year ago, I think.
I see blood. Okay, disappointment. But what if it's implantation spine?
And that's when you asked.
Hello and welcome to the Infertility Stories podcast. My name is Miriam.
And my name is Elisa.
And we are very excited to welcome you to the first episode of our podcast. And we thought we could start by just introducing ourselves. So would you like to begin, Elisa?
Yes, of course. So I'm Elisa. I am Dutch, but have been living in Hungary, in Budapest, for the last 5.5 years. I am 31 years old. And I think that's it for now, maybe.
Yeah, sounds good. My name is Miriam. I am from England originally. I've lived in Canada for the past 10 years, and I recently just moved to New York State in the US, and I'm 34 years old. From here, we could talk a little bit about how we met and how it led us to creating this podcast. So,
yes,
who wants to tell the story?
Well, I can start and you can add wherever you feel like. So I've been trying to conceive for about 3.5 years now. And at some point, I felt more and more like it would be good to speak to other people who were going through something similar. And that's when you asked in a group that we were both part of whether there were other women there trying to conceive who would like to start a private conversation about that. And that's how we started to talk. And that was about 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, so Elisa and I would consider you one of my closest friends, but we've never actually met. We've been messaging each other on voice notes over WhatsApp for the past 2 years nearly. And when we first started to talk, I had actually only been trying to conceive for 2 months or something. I was pretty early on in my journey. It's now been 2 years. And since that time, we've both experienced a lot. We've both experienced pregnancy. We've both experienced loss. And we've experienced and learned a lot about ourselves and about suffering and hardship and connection. And there's just so many learnings that we found through this journey. And it was Elisa that came up with the idea for the podcast. So why don't you share what the vision is? What are we doing here?
Yes. So one thing that I really appreciate in our friendship is that we got to know each other basically through very honest conversations from the start. So we mostly send voice notes, sometimes as long as a podcast almost, to share about what we are going through. I think for both of us, that has created a lot of, that's been a big support in our journey. It has made me definitely feel way less alone. And it has made me feel like I'm understood. There's a place for me to share also about the stuff you don't want to share about, that is hard to talk about. And it's created a lot of insight in that sense as well. So by talking to each other, we can help each other. And I noticed so many times that you gave me insight in what I was going through. And I can imagine that it was similar the other way around. And that's just been a huge support for me through the last 2 years. So what happened in last autumn, at some point, I was going through my second loss and I had surgery. And I was thinking, I need to hear the stories of other people who are going through this. So not only the stories of the people who have a beautiful ending already, or maybe a hard ending, but also the stories of other people going through this. So I was actually looking online quite a lot for people specifically going through the experience that I was going through and for that support. But that also made me realize that there's very few stories like that. And it would be, it just came to me like this idea, what if we share the stories of women while they are going through infertility, have their honest experience, but also how that changes. Because one thing that I noticed in the last couple of years is that it's changing all the time. Like it changes from where I'm at in my cycle, but it also changes from month to month. Sometimes we have experiences or insight that makes us either more positive or more desperate, or there's so many different fluctuations in the emotions, and they're not stable, they're not fixed. So I felt like hearing those stories while people are going through it would be such a gift, or such a support, I think, both for the people sharing their stories as well as for the people listening to it. So that's how the idea started, and I send that to you.
And I said, that's such a great idea. I want to do it too. And so we decided to do it together. And we talked about the name for the podcast. And we kept talking about, or I kept talking about being in it, right? And the importance of, yeah, like you say, Elisa, it's not about that, happy ending, or, oh, I experienced that 10 years ago. I remember what that was like. But what is it like to actually be in the unknown, in the uncertainty as it's happening, and you don't know how your story is going to unfold. You don't know what's next. You don't know how it's going to end. That's what we really want to tap into. And not only that, but the importance of talking about it while you're in it, because I can't imagine going through this experience alone, but so many people do. They go through infertility without talking about it, and talking about it has been my survival strategy, basically. So at the same time, when we were talking about creating this podcast, there's challenges, right? And these are the challenges that we face with creating a podcast like this, are also the challenges that come with infertility, and also with infertility and finding connection through infertility. So one of the questions that we asked was, what if one of us gets pregnant while we're making this podcast about infertility? How do we navigate that? And I don't know what we decided, really. We just decided to do it anyway, I think. And I think that is kind of the crux of this whole story, because we could have held back from sharing with each other for fear of what happens if one of us gets pregnant. But now we have experienced what happens when one of us gets pregnant multiple times. We know what it's like. And thank God we did share, because we had each other when we were going through loss as well. And I don't know about you, Elisa, but I found that when I build connection through infertility, finding out that the person that I've connected with is pregnant feels different than when I hear about it from someone who I maybe don't know as well, because it's so easy for us to kind of project onto people that we don't know their full story and say, oh, it happened easily for them, or, it makes us feel more alone in our struggle. Whereas when we've talked about it, connected deeply, and the other person gets pregnant, it to me, that experience has felt different. I don't know how it's been for you, Elisa, but yeah. What were your thoughts when we talked about the challenges of creating a podcast about infertility?
Well, I can totally relate to what you're saying, to both parts. Like, there is a tricky part, especially if you've been trying to conceive for a long time, then at some point it gets harder and harder to see other people getting pregnant. And especially because we only see a part of their story, like you're saying as well. Like, we only see the positive test, or we only see the pregnancy announcements, but we don't know what is happening behind that. And there's always, of course, different parts to it. And the better that we know the person, the more we know the depth of their story. So even if they got pregnant quickly, it might be a very hard pregnancy, or there's so many different parts of it that we don't know, and we're usually only jealous for one part of the story, and that is the pregnancy itself. But we don't know all the other parts. So I totally agree with this, that the better I know somebody, better, or the easier it is for me to know that they are pregnant. And of course, there are still difficult times in that as well. One other part that I was thinking about was, so the question is, what if either one of us gets pregnant? But I think that's actually a very common question that we ask ourselves when making decisions, when trying to conceive, and a very important reason not to do stuff. So let's say moving to a different country, or a different house, or starting a different job, or going on a trip, or whatever it may be that you want to do. I think often we have this thought in our minds, but what if I am pregnant by that time? What if I planned this trip, and then by the time the trip starts, I am pregnant? What are we going to do then? I don't know what I'm going to do next summer because I might be pregnant. It's so understandable, but it can also be it can be a shame, because it means that we postpone doing many things in our lives because we are in this waiting phase. And that is partly inherent to the situation where we are in. This is also why we're talking about being in it, also in the waiting, in the not knowing. And at the same time, especially if you're trying to conceive for longer than just a few months, at some point you have to figure out how you can continue doing that while also continue living, because you can't put everything aside because you don't know what's going to happen. And I think that for me is the main reason that I would like to do it anyways. And I hope for both of us that we'll get pregnant, and I hope for both of us that we'll get pregnant quickly. And when that happens, we will figure out if and how we want to continue, and if and how that changes any part of the podcast. So after being friends and building our friendship for 2 years, I also trust that we will be able to figure out a way that works for both of us. And I think that is an important part for how we started the podcast, and our intention with it is also to just do it in a way that works for us in the moment. So not to put too much pressure on ourselves, high expectations, or say that we are going to do this for the next 15 years. We're doing it today, and we'll see about tomorrow.
Yes, I love that. And I have this vision that I don't know if it would come true, but I love the idea of hopefully we'd be able to hand this podcast off and just let someone else tell their story of being in it once, we're hopefully out of it at some point and we're no longer in the infertility. But I guess that's another topic or conversation that I wanted to talk about, is just the term infertility. Like, for me, it took a long time to reconcile with the term infertility. I had obviously a lot of fear about being infertile. You know, it's like this kind of almost static description of a state of being. And even when I was told your diagnosis is unexplained infertility, which, I mean, side note, is not really a diagnosis, but even when I was told that term about 8 months ago, it still took months for me really to kind of reconcile with that term. And I guess for me, I've always tried to think about infertility as, I mean, it means so much for so many different people, right? It's a general term, but it means something different for each person that's going through it. And for me, right now, I describe myself as I'm experiencing infertility. It doesn't mean that, you know, I always thought of infertility as like a final state, like you are infertile. But what I've learned through this experience so far has been that fertility is a fluctuating state, and we can go through different levels of fertility. And right now, I'm quite sure I'm in a very low ebb of fertility. I am currently experiencing infertility, but I do have hope for that to improve in the future. And so I don't see it as this final state. I see it as an experience, something that's can change. But obviously that can be different for each person. For some people that may be it may feel like more final or more fixed, depending on what the causes of your infertility are. And as of right now, I'm in unexplained. And to me, that's the unknown. Again, one of the things that we talk about so much and experience so much with infertility. What are your thoughts about the term infertility?
I definitely see it as a gradual skill. So there are both ends of the spectrum. So there are people who are basically infertile for their whole lives, and it's not possible to change. And there is people who are hyper fertile, and then there is a whole group of people who are somewhere on the scale in between, and that can definitely fluctuate. So we both also have been doing quite a lot of work to improve our fertility, to do the changes. And I definitely believe and have seen that that's possible and effective. And for some people, there are more possibilities for that than for other people. So depending on the situation and the exact diagnosis that you have, that might mean something different. What I do remember is that I think not so long after we first met, I said in one of my voice notes to you that I think it would be helpful for me to see myself as infertile. And for me, that was a helpful thought at the moment, because what I was thinking until then is that I am fertile, but I'm not getting pregnant. And that is very frustrating, because if I'm fertile, then why am I not getting pregnant? And for me, at that moment, the thought infertility actually gave me a little bit of peace. I saw it as a temporary thing. I didn't believe or have the diagnosis or anything like that, that it is permanent for me. But it was helpful for me to acknowledge that this is happening. This is true. This is really happening. And it is something that I can do something about, that I can work on or try to solve. But it also took a little bit of the pressure of the monthly cycle, because until then, every cycle I was hoping that I would get pregnant. But from that moment on, of course, I would never say that the hope completely went away. There was always some hope or some excitement or eagerness, the feeling that, okay, maybe it will happen this month. But there was a little bit less stress on that, and a little bit less need that it needs to happen now. And I felt more like, okay, then I have to look long term. And I think it was later that year that I also said to you that, okay, maybe I should shift my goal from trying to conceive this month to trying to conceive in the next 3 years. And I think that's also one of the hard parts of the process, is you don't know how long it's going to take. So if you assume it's going to take 3 months and it takes a year, that's a very long time. But if you assume it's going to take a year and it takes 3 months, then suddenly that's all right. So the perspective makes a big difference in that. So for me, the term infertility at that moment was very helpful. At this moment, I actually am in a phase where I assume I'm fertile, which is maybe kind of weird. But for me, in the last year, a lot of change happened compared to the previous 2.5 years. So for 2.5 years, I never experienced a pregnancy. And then last year, I experienced two. I lost both. But I think that makes me hopeful that it will happen again soon, and that this time it is going to stay and I will actually complete the pregnancy. So even though in some ways I am less fertile because I only have one fallopian tube now, still I feel more fertile than I did a year ago, I think.
So interesting. And I think another thing that is probably important for us to say at the beginning of this podcast is Elisa and I both share kind of that we have a lot in common, and we share a lot of similarities in our approach. We're both pretty holistic. We're both really interested in cycle tracking. We're really interested in women's health, pregnancy, birth. Like, we're fascinated by all of that. I've done a couple of IUIs, but generally speaking, we're both trying to achieve pregnancy naturally. That said, we have a very limited perspective. It's just the two of us. But our goal with the podcast is to broaden that perspective, right? And if you're listening to this and you want to share your story, this is an open podcast. This is an open space. So our goal is to bring other people who are in infertility right now, they're going through it, to share their story. And like Elisa said, not just at the end of, whatever's happened, but while you're actually going through it. And that can be people who are going through IVF, IUI, adoption, surrogacy, whatever the journey is. We want to kind of really create a space for others to share their story, not just us, because everyone has such different perspectives and so many different insights. And I think that's one thing that both of us, there's something precious about this experience of infertility. While it's probably one of the hardest things we've gone through, there's so much that comes with that, so many insights and learnings, and it's not all learnings and insights, it's not all kind of profound, but there's something meaningful and important about the experience, I think. And that's what we want to capture in this podcast and open up the space for others to talk about.
Yes, definitely. I think the different perspectives is what makes it so interesting. And I think, like we already mentioned in the beginning as well, is that just the possibility to talk about it with other women, it broadens our horizons. Also, in the last couple of years, we both spoke to different women, and it helped us always to decide what it is that is right for us, to have a new perspective on our own situation. And there are so many different variations, and it's so helpful to be able to talk about it and to be able to share our stories. And for me also, and I don't know how that is for you, but for me also, this is actually the first time that I would publicly speak about this topic. I do talk a lot about it with people around me, and many people do know about it, but still to share it with such a big group of people is completely different. And I think actually it can be liberating in some ways as well.
Yeah, there's so much shame that comes with infertility. It's typically not spoken about, shrouded in secrecy, privacy. So being public about it and sharing the experience of it is stepping into something different, but I think something important and something worth doing. I actually had an idea, and he said that I hadn't haven't run this by you yet, but
Just go ahead.
I think you'll be on board with it. I thought one thing that we could try and do with each episode is just share where we're at in our cycle right now, because like you said in our introduction, where we're at in our cycle really changes a lot in terms of how we're feeling, how we're doing, how capable we are of, you know, having this conversation, right? So I don't know. I don't know if you want to. What do you think?
So it's very funny that you say this, because I was thinking about the same. I was thinking that maybe we should start every episode where we're saying, okay, introduce ourselves, saying, okay, this is where I'm at today in my cycle, maybe 3 words about how we feel about the process today.
Yeah.
If we both feel it, we should do it.
Psychic alignment. Okay. Well, should we maybe just quickly share where we're currently at and how we're feeling about it, like very briefly?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what's going on with me right now. I'm running away from my period like it was a pack of wolves chasing after me. I've been spotting for days, and I've been taking progesterone to try and stop my period from coming, because today I've got a big day. I'm going to go buy my first car. I'm driving. It's going to be a 3-hour round trip. I know that if I were on my period today, I get very heavy periods. I get very painful periods. I get a lot of fatigue. Side note, we'll talk about this in the episode where we deep dive on my story, but I am currently seeking an endometriosis diagnosis. So for me, I was started spotting on day 20 of my cycle this time, which is super early for me. Had such a weird cycle. I don't know if I even ovulated this cycle, honestly. Like, I didn't really seem to get much of a fertile window. Started spotting really early, and I've just been taking progesterone and trying to stop my period from starting so that I can go buy my car, and then I can be in bed for a few days or whatever I need to do. So that's currently where I'm at. And it's always disappointment, and then, but maybe, I see blood. Okay, disappointment. But what if it's implantation spotting? So I'm pretty sure this is not implantation bleeding. I'm pretty sure I'm getting my period, and I'm just really trying to delay it by as long as I can. So that's what's going on with me. What about you?
Very relatable. The symptom is the worst. So I am at the moment, I just entered my luteal phase. So I am just on the other side. This cycle was a little bit weird for me too. My ovulation was delayed. Lately, it's been very regular. And I always learn that as soon as I start to assume something will happen, it's not going to happen. So this time I assumed my ovulation would be day 18. It's usually day 18. And now it was later. Of course, immediately my mind is going like, okay, so what's going to happen now? Will I have an ovulation? When would it happen? Is it going to be within a few days? Because that's fine, but it might also be 15 days later. I have PCOS, so it might even be 20 or 30 days later. Who knows? So my mind was going all places. Actually, immediately after ovulation, I already started to feel differently. So I noticed that I'm starting to get a little bit more emotional generally. Today I feel good. Yesterday was a little bit harder. And I also have quite a lot of physical symptoms. So last cycle, I took progesterone. So I'm interested that you are taking progesterone, but I took it because it was recommended to me. And I had, it made my symptoms so much worse that I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. But I still start to feel the symptoms. So I'm like pain in my back, these kind of things. So I'm a little bit nervous actually for the next 2 weeks, how it's going to be. So I mostly really hope that I won't have too many pains and symptoms, because exactly like you're saying, last time I was like, oh, I have all these symptoms. What if? And it's just very exhausting, and just exhausting to live with the symptoms as well. I mean, if you have pain, it's harder to do the daily things. So that's where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, luteal phase, definitely. I mean, we could probably rank each phase by how hard it is, but luteal phase, definitely one of the harder phases to be in, with the what ifs, reading into every sign and symptom, waiting, trying to have patience before you could take a test or see if your period arrives. I mean, it's a challenging phase. So I guess we're both in that phase right now. Starting off at the deep end. Should we talk about what's next?
What we have in mind is that the next 2 episodes will be each of our stories. So first one, then the other. And afterwards, we're looking for other people also to start sharing their stories. So if you are going through it, if you are in somewhere in your fertility or infertility journey and are interested in sharing your story on this podcast, please reach out to us and let us know. And we're looking forward to having you. But yeah, so the first 2 episodes will be, or after this introduction episode, will be our stories.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
I already feel that there is hundreds of different topics that we could continue to talk about and dive into. Many things come up while talking about this, but I think for now, I would say thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, supporting us on this first episode of our podcast. And we hope to see you in the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this podcast with a friend who is going through infertility. If you have any questions or would like to share your story on a future episode, please find us on Substack and Instagram. The links will be in the show notes. See you in 2 weeks.